So Diane, when we were in this room earlier, we were talking about the experiences that children and teens have when they come to Juliet's house for a forensic interview. But what you and I are doing today is something pretty different. Because when you were a child, you did not have an opportunity to talk about what happened to you. How did you know that you were ready to talk about your experiences?
So I had an epiphany as I realized that with my job here as a community engagement director, I am frequently saying we need to erase the stigma. What I do hope is that if people have a story to tell, that they find a safe person to tell it to. And if you're a person that doesn't necessarily have a story, and oh my gosh, how fortunate for you, but will you please be the safe person for the other person that has the story?
So children need to have a safe home and a secure attachment to their caregivers. When was it that you realized that the experiences that you were having as a child were not normal?
I had all of these things that had happened to me during my life that I always thought were normal, like that this was happening to so many other kids, and that was just the way that it was. But I had something in particular that had happened to me, and I remember I was in 5th grade, and I was telling my friend and her family about that. And they pointed out to me that what was happening to me wasn't normal. And that made a significant difference. But I would still go home to the same chaos and violence that was happening all the time.
What were some of the things, Diane, that were happening in your home that led to Child Protective Services getting called in the first place?
I'd forget to empty the dishwasher. And when I forgot to empty the dishwasher, she would grab me by my head and interlace her fingers into my hair and shake my head while screaming in my face that I was a horrible child and how dare I forget to do this. And then for days after, my head would have bumps and it would hurt. We had instances where I didn't do something in the right amount of time or I said something wrong, and so she used belts or yardsticks or brushes or whatever she could come across to make her point that how I had behaved was not okay, and this was a punishment that I deserved.
When we were talking earlier, you told me that those physical responses to your behavior started essentially when you were an infant. You were told about that by one of your mom's former boyfriends, and that really continued for your entire childhood. And having those bruises and those welts and those black eyes and the bloody noses was really just something that was kind of commonplace for common experiences throughout your childhood. Yep. And there were some other things that you also weren't able to talk about when Child Protective Services and the police came. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so my mom had many boyfriends that would kind of come and go in our lives. And one in particular, we won't go into all of the detail about that, but there was definitely sexual abuse involved, grooming, child pornography.
So you have talked about a lot of chaos in your childhood. Can you talk a little bit about how that impacted you?
At 13, I discovered how I could use drugs and alcohol to help me feel better, to help me reduce the pain of that impact. Because of that, my grades started slipping. I started getting into all sorts of trouble. got in trouble at school. I got trouble for shoplifting, even having alcohol on campus. So it was kind of one thing after another. I almost didn't get to graduate from high school because of that. Eventually I did, yay, but definitely changed my forward trajectory.
While we've been talking today, Diane, you have talked about every form of child abuse that we look for here at Juliet's House. You've talked about sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, neglect, and exposure to domestic violence. How do you think your life would have been different if you had had access to child abuse prevention in your school or had been taken to a child advocacy center like Juliet's House to talk about those experiences?
I was in the shower one day, and all of a sudden I thought to myself, oh my God, can you imagine if little Diane had been able to go through Safe Kids? And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to talk about that. I have to talk about that. Because had I had that opportunity to know early on that what was happening in my house wasn't okay, and that there would have been people that could have helped me, can you imagine? Can you just imagine? And I think that is why the work that we're doing here at Juliet's House is so important to me personally.
I feel like your story is really one of resilience, you are coming from a place of resilience. I think to go through what you have gone through and come out of it such a kind and thoughtful and generous and funny and amazing person is pretty remarkable. What do you hope that others take from your story?
Well, one of my very favorite quotes comes from Maya Angelou about when we know better, we do better. Our message this year is stop child abuse now. But really, what we have to do before we can do that is we have to heal the hurt people that hurt people. And that is what I want people to do. I want us to join in as a community, as a village, as loving, kind, caring people to make a difference in the lives of children moving forward.
I think you telling your story, Diane, really is going to make a difference. And I can't imagine that it's not going to impact others the way it has impacted me. So thank you for taking the time, and not just the time, obviously, but your willingness to make yourself vulnerable and open yourself up this way.
Thank you.